Are kerosene heaters safe? And how do I use one? Those are the questions I'm going to try to answer today for you. Let's start with the fuel, or rather the fuel cans. So, kerosene heaters don't just catch on fire for no reason. Most kerosene heater fires are caused from using the wrong ingredients. So we have three different cans here. One for gasoline, those are red. One for diesel fuel, that's yellow. And finally on the end, kerosene, which is blue. So in Pennsylvania, it's illegal to put gasoline in either of these two containers. And I don't know, but I imagine it's probably illegal to put kerosene in here. And the reason why is because if you mix these up, you can have some really bad results. If you put diesel in a gas car, you're going to have to drop your tank and go through a bunch of hassle of getting all the diesel out of the lines and putting gasoline back in. And I've never done it, so I don't know. There could be other problems that it causes. It might damage something else. Who knows? But what's worse and far scarier is if someone uses your kerosene can with gasoline, you don't notice, and you fill your kerosene heater with gasoline and light it, you're going to have a world of hurt. If you use diesel in your kerosene heater, it will probably be more smelly because diesel is not as refined as kerosene. So that's probably the most important thing about kerosene heaters is making sure that you have kerosene in your kerosene heater. Once you got your kerosene heater filled up with good clean kerosene, your risks of having a problem are significantly diminished. Okay, now that we've got our containers all sorted out, I've got my kerosene container that I've had since it was new, and I know this is good clean kerosene in here. So I'm ready to go ahead and start filling my kerosene heater. So there's actually a couple different ways to do that. The most elementary way is with a funnel. And I recently discovered this, diesel exhaust fluid funnel. So this one's kind of a double-edged sword. It's got a really neat little shape here, which kind of makes it easier to pour from like out here. But this is really small here, and when I first used it, I poured out too much too fast, and kerosene spilled all over my kerosene heater. So if you are going to use this particular funnel, be really careful when you pour it out. I would recommend getting a better funnel, which I don't have. And the reason why I don't have a better funnel is because I generally don't use funnels to fill my kerosene heaters up. I like to use what's called a siphon. And I have a couple of siphons right here. So this is your elementary siphon. These are pretty inexpensive, in the like $5 or $10 range. It's been a while since I bought one, but they're pretty cheap and inexpensive. And the way you use this, and gravity is your friend here, so it can kind of be a pain, but you're going to stick this guy down in your, well, I got force valve thing here. So you're going to stick this guy down in your kerosene, alright? Stick him in here, and then make sure this little cap is tight, and you're going to pump this, alright? And that's going to make the kerosene flow down, and then you can kind of lift the can up, adding more gravity to make it flow faster. And then when you're done, you can either undo this, and that's going to kill the siphon and let the kerosene run out, or you can lift this up till it's above the kerosene level and give it a minute for it to run out. Now what I like to do is I have a 5-gallon bucket here, because kerosene is stinky and it drips a lot. So I like to use a dedicated bucket to this. And I just kind of see how the little drips are coming off of there. Well, if they get on your floor, it's gonna be kind of smelly. And if you have like nice floors, which I don't recommend doing this over, you're gonna damage your floors. So I keep this dedicated bucket handy. Now I used to have kerosene heaters in my old office, and I had like a really big plastic tote that I kept my kerosene jugs in, and my funnels, and my siphon rather. And that kind of kept it neat, because kerosene drips are smelly, and I don't like the smell of kerosene. So, my preferred method is this here, which it looks an awful lot like a siphon, but this is actually a pump. So there's a little pump on the inside here. I bet you can't see there's a little impeller in there. right? And it runs on D batteries. So you can just take this bad boy here, stick them in here, put them where you want it. Go ahead and hit your pump. It's going to pump your kerosene right in just like that. No problem at all, right? Alright, now your next step. Your next step, if your kerosene heater has never been filled before, ever, like it's brand new, wait an hour. Okay? The reason why you do that is because this kerosene heater runs off of a wick, and a wick uses the capillary effect. So, that's how trees work. So there's like really tiny spaces, and the liquid just kind of like goes up in between those spaces. So, as the wick fills with kerosene, it fills from the bottom up, and it takes a while for that capillary effect to pull all the kerosene to the top. If you were to pour kerosene on the top of the wick, that kerosene would push down, it would push down with it little air bubbles. So the kerosene coming up from the top and the kerosene coming down from the bottom would kind of meet, and these air bubbles would create gaps in there, and the kerosene would kind of flow around dry spots, and you're not going to get a good burn, and you're actually going to ruin your wick. I've never done that. That's what my research has told me. Or maybe I have done that. I may have done that. I don't know. I've replaced a few wicks in my day. But if you have already filled this with kerosene and it has been used before, then you want to wait a half an hour before firing it up to make sure that the kerosene soaks through the wick properly. This is probably the biggest problem people have with kerosene heaters. If they get the right fuel, they don't wait long enough, or they try to prime it or something like that. I filled this up before about halfway and let it sit for over an hour, not because I felt like I needed to wait an hour, just because I had other stuff going on. Okay, here we are at the back of our heater. You see this little door here? This is your battery door. So this takes 2 C batteries. I have seen some kerosene heaters that take 2 D batteries. I think I had one that took a single D battery. We want to make sure these batteries are nice and fresh. Because what these batteries do is they heat up a little coil of wire on the other side to help light it. So I've had this heater in my workshop, and I've been using this thing for maybe 5 years or so. And as a result, it's taken a few hits, so the cage here is a little bit loose and kind of hangs down over this door. So if you have a nice new kerosene heater, your door should open nice and clean. But if we take a look inside here, you see we got this little spring thing here, a plate, this metal thing above it, okay? And now if you look up in there, you don't see any kind of wick or anything. Okay, it's because the wick is down. So we're going to turn this all the way up. Now you see that just kind of, it just moved that a little bit. See, as I turn it up, it moved that a little bit. Okay, so that tells me that this is not sitting properly. So you just got to kind of wiggle this around. Now, if you look here, you can see more of this bubble here than there is on that side. So yeah, that's not sitting right. So you got to get this to sit right just by kind of push this button here. That makes your wick shoot down. Then you can kind of put this guy. Oh, see, it kind of falls into place there. It wants to be in the right place. So now we see this edge here. It's even all the way around. We can see that our wick is, and we move it back and forth. It doesn't seem uneven or anything, so we're good to go. Alright, so now we're going to crank our handle up again. And we see this didn't move this time. That means this is seated correctly. Let's try that again. Here's seated correctly. Come up, look at the very bottom. It didn't move. It's seated incorrectly. It moved. Alright, we're seated correctly. So now, we're going to come down here and we're going to push this bar right here. And this is going to lift this little guy up here, and inside there you're going to see a little orange coil light up. And that coil is going to just touch the top of that wick in there, and that's going to light it. Get in there. Boom, we got flame. Now we let go. We let go of that as soon as we see flame. Then we take our hand in here, and we're going to move this back and forth. We're wiggling this back and forth, and that's going to spread that fire all over the top of the wick. We can look in back here, and we can see that there is fire going around the back of the wick. Okay. There's no smoke coming out of the top of this kerosene heater. That's a good sign. Now, sometimes when you first light a kerosene heater, they can smell bad, and I have found that even though they say kerosene doesn't expire, if you're using fresher kerosene, it tends to smell a little better. But, like I said earlier in my video, I hate the smell of kerosene, so I still can't smell it. But when I can, I'll light this outside and leave it outside for 10 or 15 minutes and let it fully heat up outside and then bring it inside. And when you do that, you're definitely not going to have the kerosene smell. If your kerosene heater reeks like kerosene or has black smoke coming up, there's something wrong and you should take it outside and turn it off. What could be wrong? Could be some contamination in your fuel, or it could be this isn't seated right. The little thing I showed you, that's not seated right. Or it could be another problem that I haven't encountered yet. For turning the kerosene heater off, it always smells when you turn it off, so I always turn mine off outside if I'm going to turn it off. But a lot of the times what I'll do is I will let the kerosene heater burn out on its own. That's actually good for the wick. Some people think, oh, don't let it run dry, it'll ruin the wick. Actually, the opposite is true. When you let it run dry, it kind of burns off a little bit of carbon buildup that can happen on the top of the wick. So by letting it run dry, you'll get more life out of your wick. So when I used to use it in my office, I would just leave it lit when I left for the day, and it would burn itself out. And then in the morning when I got there, I filled it up with kerosene and turned on my little electric heater, which kept me warm for a half an hour while I waited for this guy to the wick to fully activate, or whatever you call that. Wick up, I guess. So that's kind of how I did it. Now, people say, that's great if you want to burn the house down, or burn your shop down, or burn your office down. Well, we talked about earlier in the video with using the right fuel containers, not mixing gasoline with your kerosene, or some other fuel, or not having it seated right. If your kerosene heater's been burning properly for 8 hours straight and you leave, it's not going to suddenly burst into flames. That doesn't even make sense. Burning kerosene is just like a vinegar and baking soda reaction. Whenever you mix vinegar and baking soda together, you're going to get the same reaction. It's going to get foamy. Whether you do that inside or whether you do that outside. Same thing with the kerosene heater. If the kerosene heater is burning right, it's going to burn right all the time. It's not going to stop burning right if nobody touches it. Now, if you try mixing vinegar and water, or baking soda and water, or vinegar and flour, you're not going to get the same reaction because something's different. The same thing applies with the kerosene heater. If I threw some gasoline in here and lit this, something bad would happen. But it's not going to suddenly burst into flames after 4 hours of burning correctly. You'll know it when you light it. I believe. I've never done that before. So, I smell a little bit of kerosene now. But if this was outside, I wouldn't be smelling that kerosene. So let's talk about setting your flame right. So this is not an adjuster for how hot your kerosene heater burns. So you can't turn your kerosene heater down if it's too hot. If it's too hot, you need to open a window. Okay? Because if you turn this down too low, it's not going to burn efficiently, and it's going to start to smell and possibly create higher levels of carbon monoxide, which is poisonous. Now, if you have it turned up too high, it's going to burn your kerosene too fast. And I had one that burnt really high before, and nothing else bad happened. It just seemed to burn through all the like a full tank, and this probably lasted maybe 10 hours, and that one only lasted like 7. So, I don't know, it can only get so high because the wick only has so much travel. So if the wick was installed wrong and you could turn it up super high or something, there could be even a greater problem as far as fires are concerned. But pretty much if your wick's normal and you can get it to go below the top of that and a little bit above the top of that, your wick's probably installed right. If your wick's too high up when it's installed, you're not going to be able to shut it off. So when you're doing your wick change, check out my other video about changing wicks, and that'll tell you how to do that safely. So when it's time to turn it off, like I said, I take it outside. You go ahead and push this button here. It says extinguish on it. That snapped our wick down. Now, just above the wick, there's this little space, and in that space, it's really hot, and kerosene is evaporating off the wick, still inside that little space. So you might actually find that even when you turn it off, if you look in there and lift this up, it's hard to see, but I saw a couple little blue flashes and little flickers, and you might hear it making little puff and kind of fiery, flickery noises. That's nothing to worry about. That'll go away in about a few minutes once that last little like residual bit gets burned up and those little licky flames kind of go away. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully you can use your kerosene heater safely. Now, if this isn't working here to light your kerosene heater, you can use an alternative method. Here's my alternative method. This is a self-lighting torch, so I don't need to light it first and then bring the hot torch in here. I don't know if that would damage anything, but it just doesn't feel like a good idea. So here's what I do. I lift this all, oh wait a second, we gotta lift this back up. And I lift this guy up like this, I take this just like this, and I just shoot just for a millisecond, the flame in there. I don't want to flame this against that wick and damage the wick. I just shot the flame in for like a second. And now she's burning. So if you don't have something like this available, you could also use a long fireplace match, or if you didn't have that, you could just get a pair of pliers, you know, and just grab onto a piece of paper and light the paper, or a short match, and reach in there with that. You just need to touch that wick just for a millisecond with something on fire to get it to take. Now, inside the kerosene heater, there is another safety feature which helps keep you from burning your house down and possibly killing yourself and your family. It shuts itself off. There's a little ball in here, like a weight on a pendulum, and it hits like some kind of a trigger that makes this release the thing, the dial. So that's one of the safety features. So if you have like a really old kerosene heater that doesn't have that safety feature, you might want to consider updating to a newer kerosene heater. So check out some of my other videos. There's over 200 of them on all different topics. Thank you very much. Oh, and nobody paid me to do this, except for like, you know, YouTube or whatever with their like penny I get for every 1,000 views.